Into the climate discussion. Joining us now is Damilola Balogun, the project lead, Powering Lagos SMEs, and the co-founder of the Youth Sustainable Development Network. It's a youth-led movement accelerating progress on the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, as leaders continue discussions at COP30, what should Africa's, united message be when it comes to tackling climate change and especially protecting the continent's future?
Excellent. Great question. So I think it's very clear, right? With Nigeria, we struggle with a bit when it comes to socioeconomic development, right? And so for COP30, it is very instrumental that it leads to tangible developmental targets, right? And of course, at the cornerstone of developmental targets is finance, right? So in terms of pushing for finance, we must be rest assured and we must be confident that we are commanding the finance that will unlock opportunities as far as Africa is concerned. So there are different policies. There is the Mission 300 policy, right? So how do we fit this in to electrify over 300 million Africans? And of course, in terms of doing that, of course, is also creating job opportunities for young people between now and 2030 and even beyond, right? So as the Nigerian head of delegation has said, this COP30 is implementation and Nigeria is already taking action. And taking action means that we are leveraging and we are commanding finance that, of course, brings prosperity towards other developmental targets, such as job opportunities, youth deployment, and, of course, every other things that revolve around climate action and even sustainable development as a whole.
Talking about, turning pledges into progress, we know past climate summits, some of which you've attended, have promised big promises, but we've seen limited results. What concrete outcomes should Africans now, demand from COP30 happening in Brazil? And particularly, how can we really ensure that these commitments are actually delivered?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's important that we also paint a bit of background to this. So, of course, the Rio X Summit started in Brazil itself, in Rio, and then 33 years after, it's returning back to Brazil. So it's a moment of accountability. And again, of course, it's also important to highlight that the Paris Agreement is 10 years, the one that established the 1.5 degrees, and of course, the establishment of the nationally distributed distribution, right? So at the end of the day, it is crucial that we are able to see that we want to be able to check our accountability. And more recently, the COP29, new finance for developing countries, right? At the end of the day, it is very crucial that we are able to merge all of what has been done so far with our current policies. So I'll say Nigeria, for example, there is a Nigerian energy transition plan. How are we able to position this policy to be able to drive the necessary investments that commands that we need over 400 billion US dollars above business as usual spending, right? So at the end of the day, if we're able to tailor all of these our policies into action and then speaking with one voice as Africa, of course, we will be able to make it a value-driven type of exchange, right? Not to say that we emit less, which is already a fact. At the end of the day, we have to understand and come from a value creation and exchange perspective. And it might interest you to know again that Africa has about 60% of the world's best solar resources, and we have only 1% installed capacity up to date, right? So it means that there are a lot of opportunities in terms of what the world is talking about in terms of climate change. We also have the UAE consensus from COP28, which is saying we need to triple renewable energy access. And we have these resources, both natural and human. So how can we combine all of this together to be able to position in terms of a value exchange and value creation perspective? That definitely would put us on the right path and make us command prosperity that would drive the continent forward.
Hinging on your comments of, speaking with one voice across the continent, we have young people and local activists that, are driving climate action. How can the African youth really amplify their efforts and make their voices, part of this global decision-making process? Because in the end, I mean, it affects one and all.
Yeah, excellent. That's a fantastic question because at the end of the day, again, statistics shows that over 60% of Africa's population are between the ages of 15 to 30, right? So it's mostly young people. So I think it's again to change the perspective. We don't have to see young people as mere beneficiaries. We need to see them as co-creators. We need to be able to entrust them with meaningful projects, right? As much as capacity building is important, it is important to train young people, which is what my network does, for example. At the end of the day, we must be able to put action. We must be able to support young people who are even driven to push towards what sustainable development really entails for Africa. And bear in mind that it is sustainable development, right? It's to ensure that what we do today does not affect the next generation. And the next generation that is yet to be born actually have to benefit from whatever policies or implementation we are working towards. So it's about changing the narrative as simply as positioning young people not just as mere beneficiaries, but as co-creators, genuinely doing that. Of course, we have a lot to unlock in terms of in terms of knowledge, in terms of strength, in terms of energy to drive development, even beyond climate change, beyond sustainable energy as a whole, right? At the end of the day, innovation is synonymous to youth. And then if we position and we harness all of that together, definitely we can position young people to drive the future forward.
Thank you very much, Damilola Hamid Balogun of the Youth Sustainable Development Network. Thank you for speaking to us.
Thank you.